It's kind of like, yet again, the role that historically, like families, you hear the term, it takes a village. Well,
Yeah.
historically, we had a literal village, where you were surrounded by other people that would just care for you and help you during that time. People don't have that now, at least. So you have to find that for yourself. You have to build that for yourself. So that's kind of what we're there for.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm Andrea Hartstein, a certified professional photographer who helps families celebrate the births and lives of their children. Well, on today's episode, I would love to introduce you to Eva Monhaut-Jenkins. She is a birth and postpartum doula serving families in the Michiana area. Without further ado, let's begin. I am so glad though. Like, I have to tell you, like, I'm really grateful that you were willing to come on because we just met and it wasn't at an ice cream social for birth workers. And we hadn't met before that, right? Was that the first
No,
time? Okay. I didn't think we'd met before. And you were so willing to come on and I don't even know that you knew that you were my first person, my first victim. And I'm
I
so
didn't
grateful.
know.
So thank you so much for just chatting with me about what you do. Okay,
Of
so you
course.
you are a doula. Can
Yeah, I'm
you
a birth and postpartum doula.
so for like the average person that might wander on here and listen to us chat about this, how would you explain it to somebody that has never like what the heck is a doula?
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of doulas I think can relate to the common interaction where somebody's like, "Oh, so you deliver babies?" And no, no, that's not what we do. So for a birth doula, we are non-medical, emotional, and physical support throughout labor. Every doula kind of sets up their service package a little bit differently. I offer two prenatal visits where I work with my clients, and during those visits, we kind of map out what they're looking for in their birth experience. We talk through where they are in their pregnancy. We practice comfort measures, relaxation techniques. We talk about all of the tools and resources that will be available to them during labor. The biggest one is my hands. Those are really good for different counter pressures, massage, things like that. But certainly things like essential oils, labor combs, I mean, you name it, rebozo. So we talk through all of that. It's very ideal if they're going to have a partner with them in labor as well, that we can kind of work with partners so partner can do those things as well, because sometimes they prefer the partner to be giving them the massage instead of their doula. And of course there's a lot of mental stuff that goes along with that, so we'll talk through that as well. Just any fears that we may need to process going into labor, any feelings they have about other people that might be present during labor, including their provider, birth team, grandma, mom, whoever they want there. Sometimes you think you want them there and then you don't, so how are we going to handle that during labor, things like that. So we'll talk about all of that prenatally. We'll work on a birth plan. And then, of course, they'll get continuous labor support when they're actually in labor. And then I'll do a postpartum visit where, yet again, I'm kind of checking on a lot of it's during the postpartum visit is focusing more on how they're doing mentally, how they're adjusting with their family, whether this is their first baby or their fourth, etc. Helps them with basic breastfeeding. And if there's more serious struggles with that, referring them to an IBCLC or someone like that can help with them for the lactation support. Any other referrals they may need, like pelvic floor therapy, things like that. Even referrals to, I want to get my first 48 newborn photos taken, things like that. So, I mean, we're really there to help them get connected with whatever resources they need. And then, of course, help with basic newborn care and support and check in on their physical recovery as well.
I love that. So for you, it's like, this is what I do, you know? And for me, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing so much of like, you're an advocate for the mom a lot of
Hmm.
times. So I had three births and I didn't have a doula for any of them. And in hindsight, I wish I did because when I think of a doula, I think of just like in the birthing room. And what you're describing is so much more beyond that. Just
Hmm.
even talking through the fears going in, that's huge, you know? And then the advocacy afterwards of when you mentioned like connecting them with resources, I had an
Hmm.
idea. I kind of knew about pelvic floor issue stuff.
And it definitely kind of depends on what area people are in. I'm sure, like, I'm not in a big city, but I'm sure people like in a bigger city, like maybe it's more known there. I could be wrong on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
But a
yeah.
lot of people feel that way, like after the fact, like they learn about it and they're like, oh, I could have used that. Like that would have been great. So
Right there. And then how did you get started with it? How did you even discover what a doula was? Because I didn't
Yeah,
know until I was well into my 20s.
I'll give you like the Cliff Notes
Yeah,
version, so I don't have to tell you my whole life story.
we'll take anything.
But I've always just been very interested in birth. I remember from like a very young age just being like, I mean, I promise I won't go on like a side rant about how interesting birth is, but I mean, it is just a
Yeah, I
very
love the
interesting thing.
passion.
Like, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, I mean, I know all animals are created from not nothing, like cells, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you grow this whole person and bring them into the world, and then your life changes forever. So I've always just been very fascinated with it, but I never knew about doulas like growing up.
Me neither.
Like, didn't know that that was a thing. So I thought like if I were to do anything with birth work, it would be medical, and I'm not like a medical person. So
Yeah.
I never saw myself working with it. And then fast forward, majorly fast forward, and I'm working at Hannah's House of Michiana with pregnant moms, and I'm very passionate about that. I still work there on my doula stuff. And, you know, I just realized I was more passionate specifically about working with pregnant women and that very intimate and sacred stage when you become a parent and you kind of really transform. It's a very unique time. And then I got pregnant with my son. And I knew about doulas during that time, and I decided not to hire one at the time. Which, looking back, I don't say I like really regret it because I had an amazing team of nurses at the birth center I gave birth at, and they kind of like all became my doula in my opinion. Like they maybe they
Yeah.
wouldn't say that, but like I felt like they were my doula. So it was a good experience, but like, you know, like looking back, it would have been great to have a doula as well. But it was really like that, my son's birth, that made me realize like, hey, I want to do this doula thing. Like I'd been thinking about it like while I was pregnant, and I kind of was telling myself, no, like that's not for you. You can't do that. You can't start your own business. That's crazy, you know, just kind of the fears that get to you. And then it was after my son's birth, I was like, no, I have to do this. Like, this is my calling. It felt like all the pieces clicked. So I waited till he was about a year old just because I wanted him to be a little older so I could focus more on my training and getting my business started. So that's kind of when I finally jumped in.
What kind of training did you have to do to become a doula?
So, yeah, so there's lots of trainings out there. I think most people know of the most common one, the DONA training, and that
Yeah.
was like the original, like the OG. But there's millions of trainings out there. I actually did mine in person with another doula in the Michiana area, Hannah Norton, and it was like a pilot training program, but I think she's done one other one since then, and then I think there's a third one coming up. And I wanted to do that because I was like, it's great to do a training with locally with people in the area. So I'm part of that community from my training into my career. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was like a 2 weekend intensive kind of training, but there's ones that are like pace yourself online.
Oh, sure. And one to have the hands-on experience, like that's so invaluable, to just
Yeah,
like to see how someone else works and to see how they do it. And it's like, okay, all right, I can do that,
yeah, yeah.
and then to do it is that's pretty great. So then do you do births anywhere? Do you go to homes?
Yeah, I
And then
personally
yeah,
do them all.
awesome.
Yeah, so there's a couple of hospitals within my radius that I'll attend. There's two birth centers, Blessed Beginnings and Napanee,
Oh yeah.
which is about an hour from me, so it's right on the outskirts of my radius, but I'm happy to go there. And then there's one in New Eden in Topeka, which is also about an hour from me. And I'm sorry, I forgot there's a third one that's actually only 30 minutes from me, New Song Birth Center
Okay.
in Union, Michigan. So there's actually three that I
So before I forget, like just in case someone is watching who's like, am I in her radius? What is your radius? Like
Right.
where do you serve?
Yeah. So I am based out of Cassopolis, Michigan, and I serve about an hour radius. So
Awesome.
apologize, I'm very bad with geography.
It's
You could
okay.
just do what I would do if somebody like messaged me and I wasn't sure if they were within my radius. You know, if it was a town I wasn't familiar with, I would literally type it into Google and see how far they are.
Yeah.
That being said, if they were like a little over an hour, like I'm still open to doing a consult, and if we feel like we're a really good match, probably definitely not over an hour and a half, just at
Sure.
least right now where I'm at with a young one of my own. So yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That makes it so much more challenging when you have young kids. But it's not
Yes.
impossible. It's
No.
I had really little kids when I first started. Like I had my first daughter and then the other two came after I had already started doing birth photography. And it just kind of like I loved it so much that I just made it work, you know? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
figure that's probably the same for you too, of like, this is what I do.
You just have to have a really good on-call support network for sure.
Oh my goodness. Do you ever get those like the night before? like as I'm waiting for a baby to come. Like it didn't have to be the night before the due date, but like especially the closer I got to a due date. Did you ever get
Right.
nervous of like, oh, I hope nobody flakes on me. Oh, I hope all of my babysitters
Yeah.
show up.
I have like two, right now I have two layers of childcare and then, well, okay, three because my husband's the third layer, but,
Oh, there you
and his
go.
job is pretty flexible. And like he's home weekends. So I'm like not too nervous about it,
Oh, that's
but
good. Yeah.
I don't know, my luck, you never know, but I'll make it work.
My husband works every other week, and so I had like a 50-50 chance he'd be there.
Oh man.
And then if I had somebody else, like I'd always have, oh man, there was a certain point that I always knew my in-laws lived 7 minutes away. And so they always knew when I was on call for a birth that they would, like they could take the kids overnight. But then that got so tricky because like if they had to go to work in the morning, the birth could only last so long before I had to find another solution. And so then sometimes I would like have
I
like college cousins stay the night at my house. But like after 2 or 3 days of that, of, like, staying at my house with nothing happening, they're just like, "Do you really need me?" I'm like, "I need you now more than ever." Again. But now that my youngest is 8, oh my goodness, like, the pressure that's relieved from that is just it's coming, the best is yet to come.
right, yeah.
When you can just leave in the middle of the night and everybody's okay and it's not gonna be a big deal but
Yeah.
well, very cool. Okay, so me I'm just looking at my notes. Oh, yeah. Your style. You seem to me very calm and, like, measured. I try to be a fly on the wall and just stay out of everybody's way. That's my goal. But
Yeah.
but for you, like, how do you think other people would describe your style, like, once you're there?
Yeah, I definitely think calm and relaxed. You know, I'm trying to be the presence that I'm needed to be in the room. So that being said, if you feel like you need someone that's a little more high energy, naturally, I'm probably not that person, but I'm going to be what you need me to be, if that makes sense. I mean, that's why consults are great. So you can kind of get a feel for me and my energy and see if I am that person for you. And then I would also say, like, I'm personally, like, I'm the type of person that really wants to be kind of almost like a mother figure, although I don't like saying that because some people don't like their mother figure, so then that's a negative connotation, but you know what I mean? Like, very
You
motherly, very
definitely give
caring.
me, like, motherly vibes, but then also just big sister vibes, of just,
Yeah, I
like,
like that better too. Yeah.
or aunt, like, just someone who's been there before, has walked it before, you
Yeah.
know where you're going, you're the guide, and yeah, I think that
I
works too.
like to be a point of contact for knowledge and information that, I mean, if you want that knowledge and you want that information, I'm there for you to give that. I'm a researcher on my own. So I'm the type of person, you give me a topic and I'm gonna read like 7 books on it, 20 articles, 3 podcasts.
Right?
Yeah. Dive deeply into stuff. So I like to be able to share that if it's wanted. Some people don't want all that information.
Well,
So
and
I'm not gonna give it if you don't want it.
even if they don't want it, you having the knowledge is so invaluable because then you're prepared, and you know what's
Yeah.
coming and and they'll just follow you. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. What would you say your favorite part of
The job. But
or that well,
uh,
so you mentioned the pre-consultation aspect of it and preparing for
mhm.
birth. And then you also mentioned after birth. What does postpartum doula look like? I've actually never seen that in action.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really talk about that. I kind of explained what I do as a birth doula. So I have a couple different postpartum doula packages that people can kind of look over on my website. I'm happy to make kind of a custom package with them as well. But all of them, I'm doing the same thing. So I don't want that to be confusing. Like I'm doing something different.
Oh,
And as a
sure.
postpartum doula, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain really what we're doing because it can be different every time. So on the surface level, like what we are doing is we're there to support the new family. And that can look like sitting there and talking with them for the whole visit because they feel like they haven't had human contact with anyone other than their crying baby for a week and they're losing their minds and that's what they need.
Yeah.
It can look like taking
Right?
baby. So
I've never
like
been there. None of us can relate to that. The
yes. Yeah, I remember those days vividly. It can be, hey, I really need to go take a nap. Can you watch baby for me? It can be washing their dishes and parts and bottle parts. Also remember that vividly. And, preparing them meals. It can be helping them entertain older children so that, they can focus on baby. A lot of it is conversational about, newborn care, concerns, questions they have. So we don't give medical advice, but we can share information on anything, and then yet again, referrals, like if they're looking for the right pediatrician for them and they want a pediatrician that values this over that, we can help them find the right fit for them. Or, if they give us a question and it's something, more in the medical area, we can be like, yeah, maybe you should give your pediatrician a call about that. Or even
Mhm.
on their own recovery, like maybe you should contact your midwife or your OB or whatever. So yet again, we're doing some of that checking up on their mental and their physical recovery, how they're adjusting as a family, assessing kind of their postpartum mental state is a big part of it. So I'm not a licensed mental health counselor, but I am trained to recognize signs of postpartum mood and anxiety disorders and help them get those resources if they need resources to help with that. So it's kind of like, yet again, the role that historically, like families, you hear the term, it takes a village. Well,
Yeah.
historically, we had a literal village, where you were surrounded by other people that would just care for you and help you during that time. People don't have that now, at least. So you have to find that for yourself. You have to build that for yourself. So that's kind of what we're there for. And like I said, it can look different. I'm not gonna. I'll go in to a visit with a list of things that I'm trying to in the background kind of assess how they're doing, because I'm not gonna go in and be like, do you have postpartum depression? Like that's not how it
Yeah.
works.
Oh,
You
sure.
just it's just from conversation, you're kind of, how are you feeling? What can I do to support you today? And go from there. And a big part of it's that mothering the mother. Everyone comes in when a new baby's born in a family and they look right at that baby and they want to hold that baby. But people don't always look at the mother and say, like, how are you feeling? How's your recovery going? You want to talk? What do you want to talk about? So like it's really a nurturing presence that's there to support you however that may be.
I can relate to all of that. Was when I had my first one, and I might have we might have talked about this a little bit when I saw you at the ice cream shop, but the when I had my first daughter, we didn't know I was going to have a C-section. I went in and had 32 hours of labor, and then I ended up having a C-section. But
No.
then once I had the C-section, then we understood that I wasn't allowed to carry things for 2 weeks, and I wasn't allowed to go upstairs, and there's so many restrictions after you've gone through that, and we didn't know how seriously to take the restrictions, like, is it okay if I'm alone with the baby? Would I be all the things that you just don't know because 'cause you've never done it before, and so my in-laws invited us to stay at their house for 2 weeks, which I know probably isn't for everybody, but it was like the most loving thing anyone could have done for us because like I would wake up, I would spend the morning with the baby, we'd go downstairs for lunch, my mother-in-law fed us, she'd keep the baby
Oh,
for 4 hours while I went back to bed, and then I'd get up for dinner, and then I would have the baby at nighttime, and we did that for 2 weeks, and I felt so supported and so taken care of,
yeah.
and I got to sleep, and
Yes.
and if I didn't have them in my life, like, if they hadn't offered, I never would have asked for it, I don't think
Yeah.
I would have thought to ask for it because it's just, like, in our culture, it's like, "Well, I can do it." If the probably the number one thing I remember people saying to me if anything got hard, it was like, "Well, you wanted this baby. You're the one who wanted a baby. You talked
Oh,
about
yeah.
wanting a baby." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but I didn't know it was gonna be
Yeah, that
like." I
I think it goes back to, in my opinion, how undervalued parenting and mothering specifically is valued in our culture. Like it's one of the, in my opinion, honestly, it's the biggest thing a person, if they choose to do it, can do in their lives. You're
Yeah.
raising and forming this whole person and who they're going to be and how they're going to interact with the world going forth. And it's just so undervalued. And I think that's reflected in specifically the postpartum period here. And I'm
Agreed.
speaking specifically to America, where we are, because other countries do, I think, value it better. But just with the lack of parental leave that is granted to families, and then the
Yes.
way that you're expected to just kind of bounce back into things as if you didn't just push a whole human out of you. And
Have your stomach cut
like
open,
if you're
pull the baby out.
laying in bed with cuddling with your yeah, if you're laying in bed cuddling with your baby, you're viewed as like lazy, when really, like, can we talk about the fact that even if you're not breastfeeding, you're still like pretty much around the clock doing something related to feeding your child or
Yes.
changing them or keeping just it's exhausting
Yeah.
and it's just not valued. And I think that's really sad. I think one of the questions you had for today was, what's my least favorite part of this work? And I would
Yes.
say it's that, knowing that that is kind of the reality that parents are entering into here in America, and that that and like the lack of respect and flexibility within our medical system, and that there's things people can do to advocate for change, to ask for change for themselves, to advocate for what they want for their birth, but the system itself still exists. And these cultural, I don't want to say norms, because I mean, it kind of is the cultural norm, but it shouldn't be. So I
Sure.
don't like saying that, but this cultural attitude, I guess. And if a mom wants to and feels safest to birth in a hospital, great for her. She feels safest at home,
Yeah.
great for her. I'm here to support whatever she wants, and what I want might not be what she wants, but we're different people. Like, that's how it's going to be. So
Well, and I
I just
love
wanted
that
to like
you're
distinguish that. But
I love that you're that you do go to all places, because feeling like I didn't have much choice but to be in the hospital, which like, and I had a fantastic experience. I had a really great experience. But like,
I'm glad.
but knowing that you could be there, like have like for, like knowing that a
Right.
doula could still be in there and advocating for you and just walking you through, like, I think that's fantastic. That
Yeah.
in all birth scenarios that a doula can be there.
Yeah, I think so too. I hope it only continues to become more prevalent for people when people
Me
learn about it.
too. Yeah, no, my mother-in-law was the one. My mom she couldn't be in the same state with me when I had my first daughter. And so we invited my mother-in-law to come to the birthing room. And I didn't know what a doula was at the time. But there was at one point, I was in like tunnel vision and I wasn't breathing. And so my husband was just telling me, like, Andrea, you have to breathe. You have to breathe, Andrea. And I'm like, I'm breathing. And I wasn't breathing. And my mother-in-law came down to my face and she's like, Andrea, you're not breathing. Breathe with me. And then she like
Aw,
had me breathe with her. And it was exactly what, because I didn't realize I wasn't breathing until she showed me like to breathe with her.
yeah,
And that was like the closest thing I've ever had to a doula, was that moment. And it was, I mean, I still remember it to this day because it was just exactly what I needed. My poor husband had no idea what to do.
my husband didn't either. Yeah, she sounds like she was basically your doula, and I've heard of like family that will take doula trainings not to become doulas, but
Oh,
just to like
sure. To support their
support their
family.
family through it. So
Yeah,
I mean, but
that's
I mean, she
wonderful.
sounds amazing. Like, is this the same relative that where you like took care of you postpartum?
No, so that was my stepmother.
Oh, you got like
My
amazing
my
family.
stepmother-in-law, and this was my husband's parents are divorced, and so one was the one
Okay.
who was in the room with us was his mom, and then Cammy, who took care of me afterwards, was his stepmom. And I know, I just, especially when you don't live around family, like, who do you call
Yeah.
and ask to be this in your life? And they would call you. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your least favorite thing. What was your favorite thing about what you do? Maybe you've touched on it. We have.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I was kind of jokingly saying the whole job,
Oh,
but I mean,
sure.
it
Yeah.
really is. But if I had to like kind of hone in and pinpoint it, it's just being there in those moments
Yeah.
as a presence. And I don't know how to really explain it if I'm honest, but it's just, like my mission statement that I have is to support and protect the sacredness and sanctity of birth and postpartum. And so, I mean, it's really that's my favorite part is doing that, being that person that can help facilitate that in the birth in their home. Yeah.
Do you have any Kodak moments from your time as a doula? Was there anything where you were like, man, this is why I do what I do? Like, that was it.
I just have to say, like the first birth that I went to really stands out to me, probably because it's the first, and I'm still fairly new at this, so I haven't been to like hundreds of births or
Oh,
anything.
sure.
But her birth didn't go as she wanted it to go. It did end in a C-section, and it was a really long induction, and just all of the things that you don't want anyone to have to go through. But just after the baby was born, and it was a few days after that, I kind of connected with them and said, "How are you doing? Do you want to set up a time to talk further, do the postpartum, and to just see the gratitude and the joy on their faces, and them holding their little baby, and just like they were a little family unit now." That really stands out to me. I think partially because it was such a long and rough labor and ended in C-section, which was something like she knew was the last resort for them. And to still feel like they had been so supported and they were able to get through that experience made it really like stand out to me. And I have to say, for birth clients specifically, I've had some really funny clients. I don't know what it is that like, or maybe just everyone that's having babies right now is hilarious, but like those moments stand out to me, like the moments at like 2 in the morning when they're not resting because they're having really intense contractions and you're just having conversations with them, and talking about the most random things. I don't even know like where these conversations come from. And you're just like laughing with them, and you can tell that it's just like helping them relax just to have that jovial mood. That I enjoy that too.
Oh yeah, those are the moments. So you mentioned that you're just starting out and continuing for another 100 years, I hope. And I've only been doing birth photography for 12 years. I was just celebrating the birthdays of the 10-year-olds from 10 years ago
Oh,
that I've had.
that's so sweet.
And to hear the stories 10 years later, I do make a slideshow of the images for every birth that I photograph. And parents have told me every year on their birthday, they want to watch the slideshow of their birth. Like they'll
Oh,
pull it out and they'll put, and they'll watch their birth and talk about all of the moments. The one that stands out who had shared about that with me, her dad passed away. I think it's been over a year. But it's all fresh for her. And so for her to, she's
yeah.
like those pictures are all the more precious to me because my dad's holding my daughter in those pictures and she gets to see him
Oh,
again and I get to see him again. And, and it's so anyway, that you have all that to look forward to when, when years from now, when people will reach out to you and say, you know what, it's because of what you did in that labor room that I got through this really
yeah.
tough moment, or you're the one who helped me figure out that I was having mastitis.
Yeah.
Those are the moments. What you do is so important. And I love it. You mentioned a couple of things that you're passionate about. Is there anything about what you do that you want people to know about where you're like, this is what I wish everyone could understand?
Oh, wow.
I know, kind of big tech.
That it's not, I'm trying to think how to word this, that it's normal to need that support and it's okay to ask for that support, even if you don't think you need it and then turns out you do. I'll
Yeah.
use myself, for example, with my postpartum. I loved being pregnant. I mean, I had a pretty smooth and easy pregnancy. You're going to be sleep deprived, you're going to be tired. You kind of know what's coming, but if you've not been through it yourself, even though I've worked with
Really don't
moms, I used
know.
to nanny, I, worked with moms at Hannah's house. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just gonna be like a little tired. Well, needless to say, I was definitely more than a little tired. And I didn't really seek out that support. And, this is a whole other can of worms. There's a lot of barriers for people to get that support. Obviously, not knowing it exists is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Fear of not of like how you're going to be judged for asking for help, which goes kind of back to the mindset in our culture. And then of course there are some financial barriers for people. I mean, I try to work with families. I do offer payment plans, sliding scale things, and being a newer doula, like I'm a little more flexible with that. But those barriers do exist, and so I recognize that. And there's other resources that in the community for some of those people who might not otherwise be able to access those services. But I think people don't realize they need the support, and then when they do, they're afraid to ask for it sometimes. So I don't even remember what the original question was now, but
What do you want people to understand that maybe they don't
oh yeah.
understand? I think you're doing a fantastic job because that's all of that
Yeah, well, that I
misconceptions.
guess.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah. Well, very cool. How can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is lunanataldoulacare.com. I'm on Facebook as Lunanatal Doula Care LLC, and then on Instagram at Lunanatal Doula Care. So I'm pretty easy to reach. I have a blog. I don't know if we have any people out there that like reading. My intention with the blog was to kind of give people some more in-depth information than I would do like on my social media
Oh, sure.
on different topics. So I had one on just like postpartum meal planning, trying to get people ideas and like how you can do that to prepare for postpartum. I have one I think that's coming out soon on different baby wearing carriers and like what baby
Oh,
wearing
yeah.
is. Sometimes you say like to a mom who might not be like immersed in that and they hear the term baby wearing and they're like, what is this? This sounds weird.
Right.
So, kind of going in depth about that. And then, of course, kind of introducing like what doula support is and breaking that down. And I had one on how doulas support partners. I didn't really explicitly touch
Oh,
on that
yeah.
today, but yeah, like when a doula is hired, like there's the person that's probably like the birther, whoever that is not
Right.
just the only person we're focused on. Comes into the birth room and wants to sit there, next to the bed or something with her for a while. I might ask grandma, like, I'm going to give you guys some privacy so you can
Mhm.
talk. Is there anything can I go get you like some water, something like that. I'm there to support them. Or back to the partners, we talked about that fear and that uncertainty because a lot of the times especially if they don't take a birth class or something. They're like, what the heck is happening? I mean, they know what's happening, but they don't, and it can be very overwhelming and scary. And to just tell them, okay, so here's what's going on. This is normal. Or if things aren't going as planned, that's even more scary. So right now there maybe some nurses and doctors rush in or something. And, I'm not trying to like make this like a super dramatic example, but,
Oh, sure. But that
you know,
happens all the
like,
time. Yeah.
okay, keeping partner calm. Like right now, they're taking her blood pressure, telling them what's happening so they know because none of the nurses are stopping. They're like, okay, now we're going to take her blood pressure or we're going to give her this medication because she's potentially hemorrhaging or something. Like
Oh,
they don't
sure.
know what's going on. All they know is there's a lot of blood or something and they're scared. To use
Yeah.
I hate to, like I said, use a dramatic example, but I think that's a good way to kind of visualize what we are there to do for partner.
Yeah.
And then yet again, like, hey, you've been here for a while near her bedside. Like, why don't you go take a nap? Or can I go get you something? Get some fresh air? Or do you need to go home and say goodnight to your other children and then come back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Because then she's not alone, and he can do
Yeah.
what he needs to do in the meantime. And
Yeah.
I think even like the moments that are challenging, I think it's great to talk about them because sometimes, I don't know. I think when I first went in for my first birth, I kind of had this expectation everything was going to go fantastic. It did for my mom. She didn't have any
Right.
C-sections. And one of the best things that we did take a birthing class ahead of time. And I felt so prepared because we talked about all the things that could go wrong. And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like there's so many things that could go wrong, but like just as things weren't going the way that I planned, I never panicked. I understood, okay, this is happening because of this, and this is happening. Like we talked about that in the birthing class. And
Right.
here, okay, this is what's happening, and that knowledge is power and comforting, I think, sometimes
Yeah.
because the scary moments do happen. I'm just grateful that worse things haven't happened in my 12 years of doing this.
Right. Yeah.
But well, yay. Okay. And then so we've talked about social, like they can find your blog, they can find your website, find you on
Yeah.
all the social media. Any final thoughts?
Thank you for doing this. This was fun. It's always good to talk birth with people. I talk with my husband about birth stuff all the time, and he gets this look on his face like, okay, I'm done hearing about placentas for the day. So,
Yeah. No. I love all the things. So yay. Well, thank you again.
yay.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you had fun because I had fun
Yes,
too.
that's the one thing I really regret not hiring was because I mean, like, I'll always remember that day, and we have some photos. I think like the midwife took a few actually, like after he was born, of like my husband snipping the cord, things like that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we really wanted to have a beautiful like labor and birth video. I don't know why. That was just something I really wanted. And our plan was my husband to set up a tripod, and at the birth center they said that was fine as long as it wasn't in the way of like if they needed to, get in for anything
Oh,
important.
sure. Yeah.
Even just like taking heart tones or anything, they said like, it has to can't be in the way. But my labor happened really not, it wasn't a precipitous labor, but it did all kind of escalate really quickly. You could so
Yes.
my husband didn't realize that well, also it was really dark in there. So he didn't
Oh,
like
no. Yep.
he was just like right there with me. He didn't realize that it wasn't like
Doing what he
according
was
very
supposed to be
well.
doing. Yes.
So we actually didn't watch it until my son's like first birthday, and we transferred rooms at one point, and like literally there's like three parts of the video you can even see. One is
Oh,
like right after he was born, so that turned out decently for like a few seconds. You could kind of see it because I think they turned the lights on to kind of assess me just to make sure.
oh, sure.
So needless to say, I'm a little disappointed in how it turned out, but it's okay.
When we talk about like our whys of like why we do what we do, your experience is a big part of why I started doing what I do because I didn't have any birth pictures of my first daughter, like nothing at all. I had 32 hours of labor and I had an epidural. The epidural didn't work. He came in to
Oh
adjust
man.
it. Then the adjustment didn't work. He pulled it out, put a new one in. It didn't work.
Oh,
Adjusted it again, didn't work. Gave me a spinal. The spinal didn't work. And so when I
oh
went in
my
for my
God.
section, I don't know why it didn't work. I don't know. But I just remember laying on the table in the OR and the doctor pricking my leg and I felt it. And I just looked at him and reacted. And he didn't even talk to me. He just looked up from me on the table to the anesthesiologist. And the anesthesiologist was like, we're going to knock her out. Like we're going to put her
Yeah,
on.
you had to get like the general. Yeah.
So I was unconscious
Wow.
during the birth. And
Oh,
so that was at 1:37 in the morning. I have a picture that a nurse took of her in my husband's arms, like right after she was born. But then I didn't get to meet her until 10 in the morning. So like I was unconscious until
Oh,
4. Then they let me sleep from 4 till 10. And then I met her. So she'd had 3 bottles with 3 different nurses. And it very much felt like somebody was handing me somebody else's baby. Like when I,
yeah, that initial bonding, that is so important. Like, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like, that is
oh,
rough. Like, you don't even get to see, I mean, if not everyone wants to see that, but like them actually like bring baby out and like be
yeah.
birthed.
It's like
That's so
I don't even have
hard.
a memory, let alone pictures of it, you know?
Gosh.
So funny. Oh, well, I will let you go. Eva, thank
Alrighty.
you so